Well, hello everyone. How is everybody doing? Welcome to another Industry Spotlight. My name is Ian Robinson, and I am greeted by a very special guest. Everybody say hello to Ashley A. Adams. A Cubed, hello, welcome in. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Hi. Hello. I stream here a lot all the time anyway, so
Oh yeah, and also
semi-special.
it is awesome too, by the way, that you do stream for us. We're
Yeah.
really lucky to have you here. So thank you again for coming on. Just real quick before we get started, if anybody's new to the stream, Industry Spotlight is a segment that we cover artists within the industry, various industries. Some of you might know that our program, ZBrush, is in multiple industries, over 10 plus industries. So we try to reach out to artists who are in various industries and have them bring their expertise and how they use ZBrush in their pipeline. So if you have any questions, I'm monitoring the chat over here. So if I keep doing this, that's what I'm doing. I'm reading the chat. But before we get into it, I would like to say that we do this every Tuesday for the most part. So we do have, let me grab my screen here in a second. Boop. So I do have every Tuesday we have an industry spotlight here where you can go and remind me. As of next week, we have Brody Perkins featuring NECA with Toys and Collectibles. So we're going to do another Toys and Collectibles one. This one should be really interesting because it's a little bit different than Brian Beatty's. Shout out to him. And then of course, two, Ashley, you're here. Here's the body of work that is just amazing, by the way.
The stuff. The
so
juice.
Anybody who has questions, feel free to come on in. But without further ado, Ashley, would you do us the honors and explain who you are, what you do for a living, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so okay. Well, if anybody is not have not seen any of my streams, essentially what I do on ZBrushLIVE is a little bit different from what I do in the industry. So that's why it's kind of interesting to have this sort of talk, because I don't usually share a lot of the stylized stuff that I get to do because a lot of it is under NDA. So some of the stuff that I'm going to be showing here actually kind of feels a little bit weird to be showing and talking about it, because so much of my stuff is under NDA. And also the fact that when it does get to production, if something does get to production, it's just such a massive team effort that I'm like, well, I did the sculpts or I did this part of the design, but it's so many hands are always on top of things. So it's just like, I'll be sharing what I did. And, if there's any questions as to what it's like being a character designer that uses sculpture primarily, or, sculpture to do illustration, any kind of viz dev work, feel free to ask. I started actually as a 3D character modeler, so a character artist in studio before I actually moved to doing freelance viz dev work. So it's kind of been I have a little bit of a mixed bag of from modeling all the way to 2D skills as well. So I kind of just do whatever I need to do to get it done, right?
No, and I think that's awesome too, because that's something that I think is a big misconception when trying to get into industry is you don't always have to do just one thing. Actually, the more knowledge you gain as you're progressing through your career, the more hats you can wear and the more you can offer the industry as well. So the more skill sets you apply, being a 3D modeler, you could just be a 3D generalist and you could be happy there. But if there are other directions and careers that you can do to apply different skill sets. So that's what we're going to be going through today, which is awesome. And yes, if anybody wants to know what NDA stands for, B, thank you for putting that in. It's non-disclosure agreement, meaning that your hands, they are locked. You can't talk about it until the studio says you can. And that's also a really interesting talk too, that, we could spend all day talking about it. But, as you get into the industry, you're here on Pixelogic Stream. So do you play with personal work on the side so that you can showcase your talents and abilities and not just say well, it's under NDA, I can't do anything?
A little bit of both, right? I'm constantly throwing the NDA card around. People are oh, let me see your stylized stuff. And oh, I need to do more of that in my spare time, right? So that I can show it off. For example, all the pose sheets and expression sheets and things like that, color keys, all this kind of stuff that I do. I just don't do that in my personal time because I do so much of it for work. So then when I'm doing my personal stuff, like I am showcasing, workflows, but a lot of it's illustration on like different styles and stuff, right? So it's kind of it's interesting even that the stuff that I have in my portfolio still gets me work for the stylized stuff that I do. Like, it's very interesting, right? So in a way, I would also consider myself kind of like a gig worker, right? Like, I mean, it's freelance, but it's like so many different types of things that I'm doing that, it's like gigs.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and let's load up ZBrush here for a second, because we have a lot to talk about. We did get a question that popped in immediately that I think will be really cool, which is what does a portfolio of an artist who's trying to get into VizDev look like? What does that entail?
Okay, so if you're like specifically trying, so this is going to be very interesting, and this is where I'm like, okay, I apologize, I'm all over the place. And when it comes to portfolio advice, I'm not like a keystone person to ask about that kind of stuff, because a lot of my work actually comes from word of mouth. I'm a little bit of an interesting situation because the work that I do, it's very close to directors as well. So one director will know something, and then it'll get passed on to another director or whatever. So I have like a network of people that I get to work with, which I'm very fortunate for, and I love working very close with these people. But my portfolio isn't exactly ideal for VizDev as a whole. So it really depends as well, like, what aspect of VizDev you want to like tackle, because there's a lot of different things. You could be a 2D background, like focused VizDev artist. You can, and you can replace VizDev with like, what people know as like concept art for games as well. It's kind of in the same vein. VizDev is sort of like an umbrella term for like design and like pre-visualization before things are even in the production, right? So essentially, you want to be showcasing a lot of stuff where you're exploring and a purpose to why you're exploring it. Like, it can't just be like, oh, this is a cool shape, but then like, why? What's the story there? You need to showcase your storytelling and all of that kind of stuff. Actually, there was an interesting YouTube thing that I saw recently. It's like Valhalla for Artists or something like that. If you want to look that up, it's like an entire thing the guy is doing for VizDev stuff, and he's doing it all for free. So if you're interested, you could check that out as well. But and he briefly touches on the 3D aspect too. So I'll be getting more about in the 3D. But if you're also interested in the 2D aspect of VizDev world, which is a lot of it too, is painting over stuff, and because like a lot of stuff gets like thrown away, or it's like, not considered what, part of the direction that maybe the director wants to go in. So it'll get like tossed. So that's another thing too. If you want to get into VizDev, is don't get attached to anything that you do, because professionally, I'm somebody who throws my work away. So.
What was the name of that video one more time so we can look it up?
It's like Valhalla for Artists or something like that.
Okay, cool. We'll try to look it up as we go through, but let's go ahead and get your ZBrush up and running. And then from there, we'll try to look that up as we're going through. And if anybody in the chat sees it, feel free to share that in the link as well. So without further ado, puppers are here.
So I wanted to just like, just dive into next gen, I guess, because that's sort of like what everybody was like kind of knew that I did some stylized stuff. They were like, oh, you worked on next gen, right? Yeah, so that was actually this is one of my first chances that I got to do just like a specific like conceptual sculpting job. I was so stoked for it. I turned down like interviews working because let me try and get my thoughts a little bit more organized here to help you out. So when I first started working in the industry, I was working as a 3D modeler at Arc Productions, and I was working on the movie Barbie, and then as well as Disney's Elena of Avalor. And so what ended up happening is Tangent actually kind of not Tangent, sorry, Arc actually went under. And a lot of us were displaced and we were looking for jobs. And that's where I kind of got to meet the people working at Tangent at the time, and I felt really lucky to do so when they were just like, hey, do you want to come on and just like do sculpting in ZBrush? Initially I was like really nervous because this was back in I think 2016, and they were saying, yeah, we're gonna do the film in Blender, and I was like, wait, you want me to sculpt in Blender? Like, please don't tell me that. Like, I don't want to sculpt in Blender. And they're like, no, you absolutely can use ZBrush. So it's an interesting movie because we ended up getting to sculpt in ZBrush, and yes. I was also a surfacing artist. And I used Substance Painter to help with surfacing any of the final models. But the interesting part of that pipeline is I didn't do the models because it was in Blender. So we actually had Winnipeg do the final models, but we would give them these guys, which is really cool. So these were, so let me show you who this is MoMo from the film. This one, I really liked working on him. He was a lot of fun. I was so excited. And this is what he looks like in the film.
It's super adorable. I've seen the film, and it was a really cool film. Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, he's really, really great. And so the initial thing, this is by Marceline. These are like the initial little quick drawings, right? Like we've got like a bunch of little quick drawings that she did, which was really, really cute. And the director kind of wanted to get into 3D quickly, and so that we could start drawing over top of things and designing the characters as we went. So we had a lead character designer as well. I think that's what his title was, but it was Charlie. And he would actually help me out by doing draw overs on top of the sculpts that I would do as well. So down here, you can see some of the draw overs like on top too. But essentially this was like version 2 of him, and they would just do little like notes here and there, you know. And the fun thing about this too is because it was such a small tight project. We were actually in like a little basement studio in Toronto when we were just starting out, which is kind of, it's a little sketch, I'm not gonna lie, little sketch, but it was still like a lot of fun because like the directors and everybody would just be like kind of hanging out. And if I was doing something, they would just immediately give me feedback on that. Like it would be like a really quick, like, here we go, like this is what we want, and we could just design kind of together on the fly, which was really cool. And I got to learn a lot during that job. So in terms of like appeal and everything like that, I feel like Charlie really helped me out with that. Richard was our art director. He really helped with that. And the two directors, Kevin Adams, actually, it's funny. We joke that he's like my dad but no. And then we've also got Joe as well. So they all helped a lot in, I guess, developing my idea of like what appeal was and everything. And so then this was like the final sculpt that we would send off. Mm-hmm. And yeah, sorry, the little eyeballs or whatever. So yeah, we wouldn't really like do too much. We would just like do like a quick poly paint on stuff and do like a little turnaround inside of ZBrush. And then if it was good to go, we would decimate it, send it over to Winnipeg, and if they had issues with it, you know, we would adjust or whatever. But then they would handle it from there. And after all of the sculpting was done, I got to start messing around with the surfacing too. So that was kind of cool.
That's really cool. The fact that you're essentially, it's just concepting, you're designing, you're able to use ZBrush and just find those shapes, and it's really cool that you were able to also like work closely with a creative team to kind of help you establish what these characters would look like and how they feel. That's really awesome. And this guy's just adorable. The necklace.
Yeah. That was actually so fun. That was so sweet to me personally. It meant the world coming off of something like Elena, where like I was like, there was over 100 characters within the first 3 episodes, and I was just really overworked coming off of that project, and I didn't feel like creatively fulfilled. And so when I got onto this project, like one of the first things, this guy was like one of the first things I got to work on, and the collar wasn't designed at the time, and they just kind of let me do it, and they were like, there you go, you got your own little thing in there. And I was like, yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
So I got really excited from that, and it was just a really good feel good team for sure. I appreciate it wholeheartedly. But I can run through a couple of the other characters like that I'm not going to show all of them because some, like, unfortunately Tangent's not here anymore, like as a company.
Okay.
It is passed on. But yeah, so I don't have like all of the files, but I can show some of the things. Like here.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I also did Pin. I got to work on Pin, which was really, really fun. This one was definitely, he was very interesting for me. So I just did a little turntable here. Can I get him to read? Anyways, but the first pass from him looked quite a bit different in terms of his character. His first pass was actually a lot more like this. Which is kind of interesting. Like I remember they were like, oh, he kind of looks a little bit too slutty. So we ended up changing his design. And yeah, you can see here too the structure and everything like that. So like the structure of his actual body was not like we weren't like settled on a style specifically. It was like as we were going, the style was being developed. So this was a little bit too noodly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where like Charlie came in too, is he was really good at drawing over and showing what kind of structure we wanted for everything. He's really experienced with that. So we ended up with, if he will open, they're heavy files, but we ended up with this guy. And so usually too is we wouldn't send them like this to get retopologized or anything either. We would end up T-posing them and making sure that like there's a whole body underneath and everything like that. So it was very it was easy enough for retopology to happen, and it wasn't like, oh, geometry was like intersecting and all over the place or whatever. So yeah, that was really cool. But you get to just get in there and you can see everything's pretty like sculptural and like quick. And that was like one of the big things too, is just like getting it done within like a timely fashion and being able to iterate on the faces at different angles and stuff like that. It just sped up the design process a lot.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's also really neat to see too how it is just you're just exploring those shapes and you're just trying to find the character. So you don't really have to worry too much about that topology. Is that correct? Like you're just kind of finding it, and then from there you can fine tune once everything is correct.
Oh yeah, and like back, like this is like 2016, so like my my workflow is quite a bit different. I was not using like base meshes or anything for this. Like I was just kind of like raw dogging it. And the wonderful thing about that is if you want to, you absolutely can, right? So like this is a 14 million sculpt. It's dense enough,
Yeah.
but a lot of it was, just a bunch of Dynamesh and polishing stuff, and just working with what we wanted the style to end up being. Like, for example, like you can see here in comparison to like the earlier version that we were going from, right? Mm-hmm. Like this is very, very like no structure, right? Like it's very noodle, which is like, it's fine enough for like its own style, but we wanted, they wanted more actual underlying structure that felt more solid, and that paid off obviously. So yeah, that's that. And
nice. So how do you find these shapes of these characters? Like, do you use a specific blockout method? Are you just like I'm gonna throw some primitives together and make a human? Like, what's your approach?
Yeah, so usually for these are the old workflow. I would actually go a lot more on working with the see-through slider up here and kind of working with the drawing that I had to measure different proportions and things like that, to the actual sculpt. And I used to work a lot more high res and treat it specifically like it was like clay sculpting maquettes, like in real life kind of thing, right? Like high res. But I, as time went on and after this production, I stopped being stubborn. And now I definitely use a lot more low res meshes underneath and work with very specific, like, blocky shapes, etc. So, even this, if I were blocking him out now, I would definitely be doing something more along the lines of like, a sort of like cylindrical, like squared cylindrical shape up here to another cylinder right here, right? And then like another cylinder on his arm kind of thing. Like, and I have like a little bit of an example I can go through afterwards too, after I show like the rest of the sculpts or whatever. If we even want to like go through all of them, I don't know if you want to go through all of them, but
yeah, let's go through it. I'm sure.
Yeah,
it's so neat seeing different takes, and especially since I'm sure everybody here knows, like you said in the beginning, you're here on the ZBrush Live team, which is awesome. So, but you work differently there than you do here. So it would be cool to dive in a little bit.
Yeah, this is May's mom. So I didn't work on May. May's sculpt was primarily done by Celso. But like it's interesting because like everything is so insanely collaborative that this first surfacing job that both me and Celso got on that project was working on May together, which was the main character. So I got to do like her shorts and socks, and then he got to do like her top and like the skin or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's interesting because when you say one thing was done or designed by one person, when it comes to a production that's been released, I always feel weird saying that personally, right? Like everybody's been like touching things. So but yeah, this is May's mom. So she was fun. She every time that I, while I was working on her, I kept thinking like Pixar mom, because like the she's got like them, she's a little thick. So yeah, but she was fun to work on. And so I actually wanted to show the difference. This is one of the T poses that I had. So the difference of this is the one that I would like hand off. And so you can see everything over in the files, like over in the subtools. This was before folders. Oh my gosh. So we had to be very clear about what it was that we were handing off. So we would label everything and we would group it all together. So like both of the shoes, for example, are together. The necklace, all of that's together. The purse, everything is one single object together. And then underneath we had like the whole body here as well. But yeah, the hair was not geometry. This is, again, like it's a little messy, but it got the idea across because it just gives the Grimm artist, who is primarily Eugene at the time, if I can remember, and he would use it sort of like as a guide, and he did a really good job. It was stressful grooming. I could see him losing brain cells, but he did it.
Grooming his own hair, as he said.
Yeah, so like that's the difference between like the two as well. It's just like, here this is easier to show to like directors and get like a overall like natural, like, oh okay, like she's not like stuck like this. You can imagine her just existing, right, if she's in a more natural state, whereas like this is like you show that to somebody who maybe is not entirely art proficient. I'm gonna be like, why is her arms so straight out? Like she looks, you can't imagine the character in it. So even just slightly posing them. And I don't have like any of like the pose stuff that was done because we would actually be working in tandem with the riggers for this project as well. So in the earlier stages, we would just send them a decimated sculpt so that they could put something in it, right? Just gets things started, right? Because everything was overlapping in this production, which was very interesting. Yeah.
I love the honestly too, this is showcasing expression that a T-pose just looks so rigid and so just robotic, even for a quote organic sculpt. So it's funny with just putting them in something like you said, a neutral pose. It just makes it feel better and it translates so much better. So I think that's really neat. I'm always
she's flying.
pose things. Just pose it. Just test pose it. Look, she's just laughing. So awesome. Very cool.
I've also got rice as well. I did rice. This was so much fun to do.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. Love it too.
Yeah. There was a lot of like interesting talks with this guy, which I don't know if I could like share everything because, you know, but he was really, really fun to work on. And I actually got to, I think I fully surfaced him. You know, minus his beard and hair, but like, yeah, I got to fully texture him too for the film too, which was really neat. And then the last guy as well that I can show is this guy's name is Wang Nima, and he is actually based on like Rage comics because that was like really big in China. We were working for our client, which was actually in China. I don't know exactly the entire scope of all of that. I never really dove into the business side of what the production was or anything, but this guy was essentially like a news host in the film as well. So he would do all of the, you know, like the Rage comics, like from like the early meme days. Yeah, that was essentially like what he was doing. So like, imagine this stupid face, but yeah, it was fun. He was fun to do. He has a little toilet paper thing on his side and everything.
Super cool. Yeah. Hey, how long would you say it would take you typically to finish a character? Like they're saying, hey, we need this character done. What's your timeline look like?
Nowadays, much faster than early. So this guy, like any one of these guys, I probably would have spent like a week doing like, you know, like a full pass on it to hand off. And now it kind of resides in the day to 2 days range. I can get a full sculpt out for viewing. And a lot of the times too, it's a lot cleaner. So I feel like we've come a ways, but I'm still very, very happy with this project for sure. Actually, the production that I worked on, Grimm, Dark and Grimm, I can show some things, the sculpts from those as well, which actually was a lot more recent. It was, I think 2018 or 2019.
Nice. Well, people are very curious.
Maybe, yeah.
We had a question asking more about like, what did your work look like before the industry? So it's kind of neat too, seeing these projects. So if you do feel comfortable sharing that stuff towards the end of the stream, we could probably, if you have
you want me to do it right now? I can do it right now. I've got it on my desktop because I think it's so funny. It's so funny. Oh my gosh. Okay. So you guys ready for some like some red wax?
Are you ready for this?
Oh yeah. Oh man. So when I first started like in ZBrush, I literally just did not care. I didn't care. I just wanted to like push and pull things. You can see the beginning of the snake hook obsession though. Absolutely.
It was there from the beginning.
Yeah, but I mean like it literally lets you, like ZBrush actually lets you like have fun, you know? Like it lets you have fun and explore and just do whatever the heck you want to. And that's sort of where a lot of this is I wouldn't even like export a screenshot. I would just take a picture of my screen. Like I was like boomer hours, man. Like what the heck is going on? Like so you can see like it's very messy. And it's interesting too, because like the stuff I was doing when I was in animation school. So like where's the translation? I don't know. But yeah, like ZBrush lets you kind of like do whatever you want, get messy with things, and it's, you know, it's not going to punish you for it. You can always fix things later, and it lets you be as creative as you want to be. And that's sort of like, that's why I guess I just gravitated to using it in my illustration process and like design process and everything, is just like, because it's so forgiving. It does not matter like if you get nasty.
And that's that's the beauty part, is just being able to, you know, grab geometry, pull it, manipulate it, do what you want. I mean, you know, there's a reason why the black magic of ZBrush behind the scenes lets you build millions of polys. It's like, just have fun, go nuts. It's endless. Even use red wax. Even use red wax. I encourage it.
I don't think that's a good idea. I think you should steer clear from red wax, very far away. No, it's a curse.
That was perfect. So let's see here. We have quite a few questions, and I'm really excited. So keep bringing in the questions. So when you are working with different companies, such as like on this project with Next Gen and the next project you'll be bringing up, do you hold any rights as an artist yourself? Do you just kind of like you're contracted and everything is the company who hired?
Nah. Like you don't own your, no, this is, you're working on somebody else's IP. You're not working for yourself. This is not like, I mean, like there's cases where, you know, if you're like this like insane superstar and they want you to be like the sole, you know, like the principal artist for the thing or whatever, you could probably negotiate something if they're willing, right? But that's only if they're willing. Like most of the time it's just not going to be like that. Like you have to forfeit your rights. Like that's what the NDA is, right? Like it all resides underneath whatever studio is contracting you to do whatever it is that you're doing. And you know, NDAs expire over some time, but that just means like expiring, you know, maybe it'll be like 2 years after you signed it. Okay, now you can talk about the project, right? But you still don't own anything. So that's sort of, you know, like when you want to do your own art, you got to kind of make time for it to add it to your portfolio if you're doing so many things that are I guess like outside of the production pipeline. So like if it's in like earlier on the productions, like earlier before the production even starts, which is a lot of what I do now, is like even before things are greenlit, like I'm trying to help get things greenlit in the first place, which like it's just, you know, it takes a lot of like work, you know, going through a bunch of things that are just going to get thrown away, and understanding that none of that belongs to you. So like even if you've got like this entire hard drive of images that you've spent so long making, and all of these sculpts and all of these illustrations, all of these designs, none of it's yours, and the company isn't releasing any of it, so you cannot. That's you just gotta get used to that. That's what it is.
Life of an industry artist, for sure.
Yeah.
So you are a very cheerful person. You're very so we had a question asking like you seem so happy and cheerful. How do you keep like motivated or stay positive in the production pipeline as an artist working in?
Okay, so like that's the thing. Like if you're saying like inside of the pipeline, like I'm not in the pipeline anymore. I'm before the pipeline. That sounds so weird to say. Like no, I am above it. Like no. It just is like, okay, so imagine you've got Studio A, you know, who is just like, you know, got a bunch of clients and they've got like a script and they're like, yo, I wanna make this. And so then they go to different studios that does a bunch of viz dev, and then they'll give that script to multiple different places, and they'll be like, give me something, I'll pick my favorite, right? And so that's sort of like kind of what happens is I get hired by the Studio Bs in order to help make something that can pitch that idea back to whoever it, you know, owns the script, and they can be like, yeah, I want that, and then it'll maybe go to production. So it's like that's sort of like where I am right now. And that's freelance. And so when it comes to staying cheery with freelance stuff, it's all about boundaries and setting those for yourself. And when you negotiate contracts, making sure that you state a certain number of hours that you're going to do every week, or state, you know, if you're doing day rates, if you're doing a day rate, then what does that look like in terms of, you know, how long every single day are you going to be, you know, doing this? Is not going to be a 24-hour day, you know? Yeah. So a lot of it does come down to boundaries, because as cheesy as this sounds, it's like work-life balance. And I mean, for me, like, I don't, if I'm being real with you, like, I don't do a lot. I just make sure that when I do have my own time, that I'm, mixing it up, and I'm not always doing the same kind of thing that I do for work. That's how I stay happy, which is why you see such a contrast in the stuff that I'll do for, production work, right? Or pre-production work rather, and the stuff that's on my portfolio. Like there is a contrast there, and that helps me stay happy. But then on the other side, when I was in studio, right, the difference, the staying happy part happened with the collaboration and the fact that everybody was so involved in everything all the time, and there was just this immediate feedback that you got from everything that you did. That was really good for helping the pace, and a good production manager. Shout out to Lauren. When I was working on Next Gen, she was always so cheery as well, and that just always is like having somebody on, like people on your team who are cheery themselves. It's contagious too, right? So yeah.
I love it when the team is very happy or passionate. When ideas are being thrown everywhere at me, it's like, yes, okay, cool, let's do it. Everybody's invested. Yeah, so that's a good mental state to be in for sure.
Yeah.
That's cool. Do you yourself retopologize when you're doing the previous, or is that completely off the table for you?
Okay, yeah. So recently it's been very few and far between where I'm doing like the actual modeling. I mean, like I do a certain level of retopology while I'm sculpting anyways with ZModeler, right? Especially when it comes to the more simplistic things, which I'll show later. But for the most part, like I'm just doing a lot of pre-visualization. What is it going to look like? And if it's not what directors want, if you're pitching something and it's not what they want, why spend so much time making sure that the mesh is tight if it's just going to get thrown away? So like there's no point in doing that. I just leave that to the end. So a lot of the time I don't actually end up having to do that because I'll just be thrown onto another project afterwards, so I have to design. So then I just exported OBJ for if they want to continue with it. But it's like throwing your child off to sea. Will I ever see it again? I don't know.
No, that's awesome. All right, so go ahead and continue with. You had some other stuff I know you wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
Great. Chat is very active, which is awesome to see. So thank everybody for showing up today. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's weird for me not being like reading the chat and like doing that myself right now. It's like, all right. But so I can show some stuff from Grimm, which is Dark and Grimm was a project that I started working on as a freelance like sculptor. I did do a bit of retopology while I was on it at the end part when they needed a little bit of help. But for the most part, I just did like a lot of early sculpting for them. So one of the first ones that I did was Mr. Bauer. This was again, like when I say like this stuff was like pretty quick, like I feel like now I go a lot faster. So this style is obviously a lot different than Next Gen as well. Like I work in a like constant never ending cycle of different styles, like whatever the flavor of the day is, right? And part of the job is being able to adapt to those different styles and seeing what are the patterns between what the directors are looking for. So this one was a lot more like the brief was a lot more in line with clay and like making sure that it kind of looked like doll like, but like clay doll, you know what I mean? Like kind of not as structured as what we were doing with Next Gen. So and I did have other projects in between this, but I can't show them. So it's very frustrating. Can't do like a full chronological thing. But the main designer for this show, it was like his baby, was, if I could get the name, 1 second. Where is it? Peter Desev, I think I'm saying his name right. He did Scrap from Ice Age.
Oh, nice.
He was the design. Yeah, so he's like a really, really talented illustrator character designer, and he did a lot of like these like little thing. So that was his original design. And then the translation, right? What like we ended up going with sort of like an idea. And you'll see too how the style, it starts to get like as time goes on in the production and different directors come on, etc. You'll see actually the style start to slightly change, which is a very interesting thing, interesting part of like my job as well, as how things start to evolve over time. So the actual sculpt, I can open him up.
Yeah, it's really cool to see the evolution of a piece come together, because it is, it's like you're layering on top and trying to make it just a little bit better each time. So it's cool when that happens, and you can see like this is where it started and this is where it ended up, and it's usually really awesome.
Yeah, there's like a lot of different iterations that happen essentially, and little minor tweaks that maybe you wouldn't notice early on. But then as you look at it like as a project as a whole, you start to see everything come together. It's really, really fun. But even like just like, the decisions of like, how does the hair work? These just big chunks, and just like having them like as like these big chunks of like clay and things like that, and making sure that there's no like perfectionism. It's all kind of like a little bit wobbled and stuff, which they ended up doing, I think, as an after pass with like the textures and things, but just making sure that everything kind of had like a little bit of a wibble wobble and stuff like that. The earliest things too, so this was the earliest was when we were working on like the Hansel and the Gretel passes from early. You can see here like there's different things like, oh, how do we want to handle the hair, so I would do like different techniques, but it all had to be kind of like a clay thing. And the actual design of him and her, you can see change. So there's no point in having like the finished model. Like, why would you do that? You just want to do like the sculpt in ZBrush, and then you can easily pose this, and if they don't like that pose, you can just do another one with Transpose Master and stuff like that too. So a lot of posing work was done. But and so then this is where she ended up, where I last touched her. I think the studio picked her up after this date and did even more on top of her. So you can see how the design changed and the style changed as well, which is, I thought it's an interesting thing to show. Over time, things start to either get simplified or change in, a way that maybe a new director would have come on for. Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. That is really, really cool. What would you say? This was a fun question that came in. You ready for it?
Yeah.
What was the most boring part when you're creating a character?
The most boring part? Retopology.
I actually can put music on now, and I can zone into retopology, and I can have fun. It's weird. I used to hate it. Yeah, I used to hate it, but now I'm like, I don't know, it's a blessing almost. It's like a break. I could turn off my brain and just zone out and just let it happen naturally. But that took years to get to that level, because I hate it.
Oh, dude, no, I think it's because I had to do so much of it on Elena that I just got I just got to a point where I just had a hatred for it. If I knew that I had to retop something, I was like, God, So, I mean, now it's not like that. Like you said, I can just put headphones on, and I understand edge flow enough now that it's easy enough. I can just put down a bass and then up-res it, boom, bomb, bing, whatever. Earlier on, definitely retopology, still not exactly my favorite thing, but it has to get done. So if I'm even doing that a lot, again, like I said, a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now is just design work, right? Like this, for example, is just the sculpt. And the fun thing about that too is look at you this one specifically, I think I got done in 2 or 3 days. I had handed it off or something like that. And so it's super fast, and it's clear enough that anybody who's doing retopology, they know exactly where everything is, and it makes it really, really fast for them too, because it's clean and clear and
concise.
I was going to do that advertisement, clean, clear, under control.
Some of these characters have really nice sharp edges, and other parts are obviously really smooth. how do you find the balance of knowing where to put those hard edges and where to keep things smooth so that the shapes read well?
Yeah, so that's interesting because it depends on the production and the style that you're working with. But for the most part, I don't like to work like this. I like working like this. So when I'm taking, like, kind of just giving it like a at a glance, you know, where am I taking breaks and things like that? And to be fair too, I don't have the design for this grandma, but you know, the little designs and stuff that he did, the little drawings, they do like help to a degree dictate where some of these wrinkles might be. For example, on here, right? You know, like looking at his really nice drawing, you know, there are a little bit of like indications here. And so the idea is to just kind of block out any noise that you might see and focus on like the bigger shapes and things like that. And I guess in a sense, like, you know, if I'm not going to just say and like cop out and say, oh, it's intuition over time, because I mean it is, but
yeah,
it's also kind of like a rule of thirds too. So like if we were to look at you know, her from the front view and you look at just like this fabric, this right here is like a lot small, like maybe like you know, it goes like 1/3, 2/3, and 3. You can see like the difference, right? Like it's tiered almost.
yeah,
And even having like a very minor breakup, you can see like how you know, highlights hit and create different tonal values, and you can actually dictate with that, like, you know, how to separate and making sure that nothing is exactly like parallel as well, and kind of working with, I like to think of it kind of like water, you know, when you're creating lines in your character, is you want everything to kind of have a pinch point that kind of goes out like a taper, because
yeah,
that leads your eye. So when you're going down like a taper, if it's squeezing like the water will be pressured to go faster, right? But
hmm,
if it's big, then you relax, like the water will relax in the pond. So it's kind of like the same sort of an idea. Like here, it's very like, you know, pinch. So you're like, ooh, I'm focused on this middle part. And to be fair, this is not my design. I was interpreting the design, right? But like that's the idea, is like, okay, well, what is the initial design trying to do? Like, where are these lines trying to go? And figure out how to move those tapers to certain parts of your character that you need to be focused on. So in this case, like Pete was obviously trying to get you to focus on the center area here, you know, even just surrounding it by other skulls and stuff is pretty obvious. Everything comes to the center, right? So
yeah.
then you just kind of follow that vibe, I guess. And you can apply that to your own work too. If you don't have a design, is you just pick a point where you're going to focus, and then everything follows there.
Yep. No, absolutely. I also would encourage too, especially for new artists or artists who are trying to gain a lot of experience, to just look at real world examples. You know, a stylized character is just a simplified version of a realistic character and exaggerated in some areas. So, you know, that pinch point to that necklace, that would react very similar in real life. It's just maybe it's just toned down. You're not going to get all these crazy wrinkles like on my shirt right now. They're everywhere. These are a little bit more, like you said, directional and purposeful, which is a really great way to look at that, by the way. So that was a great explanation.
Yeah, everything has a purpose. And when you're dealing with animation specifically, everything has a story. Everything needs to be storytelling. You can't just like put something there, because then it's not going to feel good, right?
Yeah.
Like it needs to have a reason as to why it's there. And you know, Pete is an incredible designer. He's just amazing at this. He's been doing this for years. So working off of his stuff was pretty, in my opinion, easy, right? Because like I didn't have to do too much like brain work in my, like he already had like the main things. I just kind of had to get rid of the noise from his pencil, right? Like that's really what it is. But yeah, like it all comes down to figuring out, what does that design want you to look at? What's the story of that character? And why are you doing things? Like, for example, like if I were, you know, like this dress, like if you didn't have all the little like knickknacks at the bottom that's asymmetrical, right? Well, she would look a lot cleaner. Or you want to specifically put things there, and not too much that it's like, you know, breaking the style, but dictate that in a way that it looks it looks like it fits the overall spacing that you're doing for everything. So you're looking for calm and then busy and then calm and then busy kind of an idea. There's like an entire thing of design principles that you can think of too, but I don't think that that's very good to be constantly having on your mind as you're working, because then you're just going to get bogged down by rules. And you really shouldn't do that when you're doing art. You can do something, have fun, feel free, do your thing, you know, look at something, think about that piece that you're looking at and trying to interpret, and then take a break, come back, and then think about the elements of design and apply it to why you might think one area looks weird or not. And then that's how you can apply it better, instead of bogging yourself down as you're doing it, because that's not going to get you anywhere. Like that's going to make you second guess yourself like constantly, because there is no like direct rule to do anything, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, you know, speaking, because it goes for finding appeal, right? Like you're kind of searching. Do you have any tricks that maybe you fall back on that would help you find appeal faster in your work, or do you kind of like let the sculpture take life on its own and kind of just organically find it?
Yeah, so that's like a super interesting question, because appeal is just like this mystical thing that everybody talks about, you know, like what makes something appealing? And it really just depends on the type of character that you're working on too. I wish I had a straight answer for you, but a lot of it does come down to, one, the style that you're working on, right? Because appeal can look vastly different depending on whatever style you have going. You know, appeal could even mean something like, you know, like let's say a horror game. You know, it could be appealingly disgusting, right? Like it really just depends. Like, what do you mean by appeal? I know that's frustrating to hear, but if you're saying you want something to be appealingly cute, well then think about baby proportions, right? And younger, like, you know, softer shapes and things like that, then that could be appealing. If you want appealing but like strong, right, well then think about shapes that are more along the lines of like, you know, a rigid like you know, you know, strong chin, like bulky, you know, kind of characters and things. And you can get an appeal by, again, spacing things, and like a, you know, like the rule of thirds can apply to everything that you're doing as well. But when it comes to faces, again, it really depends on the style that you're doing. Like a appeal for this, for example, right? Like, you know, look at how big his eyes are in comparison to his head, and it helps you really focus in on his expression. Like he's like a ridiculous imp jokester character, right? Like he's obviously, you know, like poking you in hell and stuff, like and enjoying it. So he's got like this massive mouth and like, you know, kind of like frog like. And you know, that's like, this is his initial Peter's initial drawing of him too, right? So interpreting that, you can see like, you know, what was his appeal? Well, look at how like the sizing of things, and how much of the actual skin is there in comparison to the actual features that are going to be emoting too. So you can see that like the actual skin is maybe like a third, whereas like the features are, you know, the 2/3, right? And so you can kind of space things out a little bit more, but a lot of it comes down to just moving things around and figuring out what looks best after stepping back and then stepping forward and stepping back and coming back to it.
Oh yeah, I would love to see the skeletal structure anatomy of this character.
Yeah.
Like his skull's weird. When you did the eyes on this character, we actually had a question that came in about like how you did the eyes. Are they spheres? Did you flatten it down? Like how are those eyes?
Let's see. What are these ones? Let's see. Moment of truth.
Mush spheres. I love it.
Yeah. So does not matter, because at the end, right, something like this, if they really wanted, I don't know what they did for the final, like I'm not 100% sure what the final model looks like for the production or anything like that, but for the look, that's a totally fine thing to do, because there's a lot of productions that will just use projection eyes, right? So you'll just project texture on a curved plane or something of the sort. You don't always need to have like realistic eyes in the socket for your stylized characters. That's actually not going to really help you out in the long run in terms of appeal. So if you're trying to stick to what is real when you're doing this stuff too, it can be tricky, right? Because a lot of the time you want to know what's real so that you can break the rules afterwards. But then some people focus too much on like, I need to know the ins and outs of anatomy in order to do this. Like, I don't think that's necessary either, right? So it's finding a balance, and like, you know, practicing in both worlds is really the ideal, in my opinion, to getting to starting to understand what appeal is, you know, how to stylize things.
No, I think that's fantastic. What about like your best source of inspiration? You know, I know you work off a concept, but you know, sometimes when you're moseying through life, you're on a walk with Monty. Like, do you find inspiration in the most random places, or do you like actually just browse other artists and see what they're doing and kind of pick and choose what looks good?
Okay, yeah. So, you know, for my own work, I usually am making my own concepts and creating like my own, you know, styles and things like that. I'm not working off of anybody else, not like, you know, in these productions. And to be fair, a lot of the recent work that I've been doing, I also have not all, you know, been given drawings or something like that. I'm helping to design from the ground up, which is a lot of fun, but also pretty stressful. But in terms of inspiration, it really depends on, you know, what is it that I'm in the mood for? If I am on a walk with Monty, for example, and I see a little caterpillar on the ground, I'm not above grabbing it and looking at it really close. You know, I love macro photography. I love, you know, anything that goes deep underwater. I love all of that because it's stuff that you don't normally get to see and look at. Anything that isn't just like directly in your face, I find is really fascinating in terms of like textures and materials and shapes as well. It's just actually kind of nuts if you even look at like microbes and how that looks, and just like how they have little like kind of like organs inside of them and things like that. And you start thinking like, how does that exist on such a small scale? And that just itself gets me excited to like, what if I make something on that scale, but in ZBrush, you know? So then like, I'll start like, you know, doing some kind of a crazy concept, which is usually not as tight, you know, as what I would be doing for Previse and things of that nature.
Nice. This guy is adorable too.
Oh yeah, this is William, and he's one of the 3 crows in Dark and Grimm, and he had a lot of back and forth because they were trying to figure out how did they want to handle the feathers, especially in like a clay kind of style as well. So I don't think mine got to the very end. I did a lot of work on him, but I don't think that mine was the last one that ever got touched. But this is what I ended up with anyways. And this was like the earliest version based on, you can see his, Peter's little drawing, his little doodle of what the crow was. So I interpreted that is this, and we were like, you know, actually not, they weren't really like feeling this like sharp vibe, right? Everything started to get a little bit like softer and rounder and more clay. And so then this is where we ended up with more of like this, like, you know, rounding. You can see, you know, we ended up, I'm just completely mashed on the inside because I was at the speed of light here, right? We're going, I don't even know which one this one was, like number 10, 12, I don't know. So we were doing a lot of these, and it's nice to have like the one wing open, one wing closed, because then they can kind of get an idea of like what everything looks like as well, without having to like full pose everything every single time too. So
and you pose it in ZBrush?
Oh yeah, everything is ZBrush. I just, you know, big giant snake hook and just
No, that's perfect. No, it's and that's the beauty part about ZBrush, is that you get to just create. You get to create, And then when you're done creating, create some more, and just keep doing it. You'll end up with some really awesome work. So no, these are really, really cool. And it's neat too to also see like his body proportions, specifically this character, had changed and adapt from that first one. So it really shows just how creative that process can change and how these characters can evolve before you even see them on screen, which is so cool. So
well, yeah, too, like you know, changes can still happen in the modeling stage as well. Like, you know, if all of a sudden a client comes back, you know, after something's been approved, and you know, somebody like me, I'm like off the project or whatever, modeling will still have to do those changes. So like, you know, it's still a very creative job to be doing the retopology as well. It's just the brunt work of all of the designing is usually done by that stage in the productions that I've had the privilege to work on. But you know, like, it's not always like that. Some productions are all over the place, some are a lot more tight. Really just depends on who you get to work with. So
yeah, that's really, really cool. Do you do any hard surface work? Are you mostly organic? Do you do a little bit of everything, environment?
Yes, I've done some environment stuff. Not a whole ton. That's usually like I'll do like a little like set piece or something like that really quick, that maybe even something that needs to be like blurred in the background for displaying a character in illustration or something. But usually it's not like my main thing that I do. Hard surface, yes. I can't show any of that though. None of it has been has gotten through. So hard surface NDA.
That's okay. That's okay. One day we'll hopefully be able to one day. But that's awesome. But again, that just alludes to the point that especially if you're new and if you're coming into the stream, welcome in everybody. If you don't know, this is Ashley Adams. So we're talking about Previse, we're talking about sculpting and how ZBrush works for her on her day-to-day job. She does freelancing, she does concept art, she does a lot of stuff. So if you're coming in, welcome in again. This made in ZBrush. This is just awesome.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what I've got for Grimm and
cool
and next gen. So I can show some of my stuff as well if you'd be interested in that. I don't know, or you can ask me things.
More questions. We have more questions. Believe you me, they have not stopped. This has been one of the most active chats in most of these that I've hosted. So thank you guys for coming in and bringing in questions. So we'll go through a couple questions while you're pulling up stuff. First one is, you know, all the features or the added features that you use when you make characters, anything like organic-ish. Would you like glass? How would you approach, you know, anything that's like, well, we'll just take glass for example. If you had to make like a weird shape or something like that, what's a feature that you use that helps you obtain that?
Like, are we talking about like a drinking glass, or
let's go wine glass just to make it cool?
Like a wine glass. Okay, so if I had to like make a wine glass, I mean, yeah, I would usually just start with a primitive, right? And I would probably just get in there with the knife curve brush, kind of just immediately do a slice like that, kind of do something like this, append a cylinder, you know, down like so, get it up there, and we'll probably
all of a sudden hosted by Ashley.
But yeah, it's just like, you know, a bunch of primitives, and then you like do like your tapers with like the what are these deformers? Thank you.
A little cogwheel up there. That's what.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, just kind of whoops, wrong one, and just do that for everything and
ship it.
Yeah, just do stuff like, kind of think as much as you possibly can in primitives, right? You can see what I'm doing here is just kind of thinking of it as, whoops, that's too much. We can kind of come in here. And the fun thing about all of this too is it's all really low res, so you don't have to worry too much about it. We'll grab that, and then we can grab this down here. And I go like that. Ian probably has a great way to do this.
Oh, actually, exactly how I would approach it.
Yeah, and so like you know, and then you just start adjusting the proportions from here as well, right? To like whatever you want, and then you know, duplicate this, go here, you know, start Boolean.
Boom.
Yeah, and I was just like, yeah, we're not going to be doing Boolean during
Oh no,
this, but
done. Do that.
and then you can like, you know, merge all of them together. And there's this fancy little thing down in geometry in Dynamesh called polish. And that is a hack for all stylized stuff. Okay. So you want to be a stylized artist, just do something realistic and then do that. But like, yeah, this is your appeal button. So
polish feature. Actually, I don't see a lot of artists who stream use that feature, but I really love that feature. I think it's cool.
Yeah, it's a very nice feature. I mean, I don't have anything right now to show you, but yeah, it essentially did it. I used it on this, right? Like that's what it does. Is it'll literally just sharpen certain edges for you, and then you can clean it up afterwards and leave it as a Dynamesh. But yeah, like that's that.
This piece is wild. I love first off that the eyes are the only thing colored right now. Although I know you did a colored render, but that's a really cool way to like draw attention.
Oh yeah. If I'm doing any kind of a pass off, but I'm not doing like poly paint right away, and I want to just like get director eyes on something, I'll make sure that I just like quickly paint the eyes in, because that always throws them off. Like that's a really big tip. Like if you're giving off a gray render for something, make sure that it has some kind of life in the eyes. Like even if you don't want to like specifically like you know, with the material dictate where the spec is and like put like a pin light or something, paint it in. It doesn't matter. Give it life in the eyes, because if you don't, like they're just trust me. If you want to sell something, eyes, make sure that they're in.
No, that's a great advice.
Yeah. But this is one of the stylized things that I have posted online for my own personal work, which I rendered in Keyshot, right? Like this is the Keyshot render, but then the actual final thing, and this is panty and stocking, by the way, like I just did fan art from that anime. But like the actual painting of it and stuff, it's just rendering out a bunch of different materials. Oh, cool. And then overlaying them in Photoshop, and doing the rest like painting wise, right? So like not all of this is like poly paint. Like I did like a lot of like painting on top of everything as well, like including him and stuff. Like this little stuffed toy is all painted and everything. But you know, you get the idea as well. Like it's here, all the information's here, you know, when you light it from ZBrush, like even if you wanted to just not do it from Keyshot but do it from here as well, like you can do your lighting information from here as well and do a paint over just like that, which I do a lot of the time too. Mm-hmm. So it just makes it a lot faster when you're doing illustration, right? Because then, you know, you can push and pull stuff. It's like if you've ever used Photoshop and you've liquefied the crap out of something because it wasn't looking right, essentially that's what Snake Hook is for you, but in 3D. and so that's why I like to just kind of do design work in ZBrush, and then, you know, a lot of the time too is I'll do this little clippy thing, like, you know, if I don't like something, whoops, oh, he appeared. Wait, let me grab it. Right. And so then I'll, you know, take that over to Photoshop, or I'll just do something right here. I'll be like, actually, I want her thing to look like this in this view. Right. And then I'll just do like a kind of quick little drawing like that. And then with this, you can do a see-through. Right. And you can match it 1-to-1 if you're getting really frustrated with what you're doing. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Self-critiquing, I encourage it a lot with, you know, just in general. I think it's a great way to take a break, refresh your eyes, come back, and another way to see the sculpt. That's a great tip.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very cool. Well, when you are doing draw overs like that, like, do you like really, are you focused on just things that stand out the most, or is there something about the draw over where you're just still kind of unhappy and you're more of like, it's a more purposeful direction? How do you approach that?
You
And then I
know
have
what?
for you too, by the way.
You have a what?
A lighting question for you after this.
Okay. I guess we can do it with this one. You know what? Hold on. Let me get an example. This is like an earlier version of her. So let's say like here, if I was looking at this, let me do a quick thing. So I can just do like a quick draw over what I'm like looking at specifically. A lot of the time I'm looking at overall like shape, and this one's like, pretty, it was almost there. I remember that, but there was like a lot of like lumpy, right? So this is stuff like a lot of the time that I'll just like notice in ZBrush and I'll fix it at this stage. But before, like, maybe my eyes are tired or whatever, I'll see like this is like really flat, right? Like there's no volume there. There's nothing happening. This is like wobbly, you know what I mean? And so if I'm getting really frustrated at something, I might literally just open this, and then it gives me a different perspective, and I'll be like, oh, actually, like I want like her hair to kind of stick out like that. That gives a lot more energy, right? And then it'll come back, and I'm looking for different lines that I want to follow. So if this curve of the hair comes right here, then I'd want that to come down into the side part, right? And that gives like a really sharp kind of turn. And you can't get it exact on every single turnaround, but you can start to understand like what you're looking for at different angles, like what you want the hair to look like as like they're turning around. And if it's for something like this panty and stocking thing, it's literally just a 3D kind of like toy look-alike, right? So you're not really doing much cheating. But if it was for like an animation, like a movie or something like that, depending on what the style is, you can literally like cheat that. So it'll literally look different in every single view, and it won't be exact. It really depends on the style as well. But what I'm looking for is usually just strong shapes and making sure that everything is strong. But apologies, my hands are shaky right now. So
very good. And the lighting of especially this piece you have currently up right now, when you were moving it over to Photoshop and finalizing the render, what was the lighting that you did? Did you do the lighting in ZBrush, or how would you approach it in ZBrush?
So in ZBrush, usually I don't do too much in terms of like lighting things. I find that I don't need to when I'm like, just here's the clay sculpt. Like the most that I'll do is go over to render, go to BPR. Where's BPR? BPR shadow, and then just like make sure that this is like get out of my way. I'll just like make sure that this is like maybe like half of it, pump the amount of raise up in the resolution, as well as like maybe change like the angle of the light hit as well, so it's not harsh. And that will just give an overall feeling when it is rendered. This is going to take a little bit because they be chunky, but it basically it gives like a really like soft kind of vibe, and that's enough to give sort of like, I guess, a little bit of like an AO feel without rendering an AO or anything. It's just enough so that the director can see like, oh, okay, I can understand where the shapes are. I can see, how that looks silhouette wise and everything. And then we can move on to like, colors and actual lighting and stuff like that. Cause, they might not even be happy, right? Like this is clear enough with that like soft, like easy render in ZBrush to then just like give that over, and they're able to pick things apart or whatever if they need to. So I don't do a lot of my lighting inside of ZBrush. I just send my stuff from ZBrush with the bridge to Keyshot, and I'll go back and forth a lot, like in terms of finding a composition and things like that for more of like the illustrative stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. And then, of course, too, your personal projects, you draw as well as sculpt. Do you find that helps you with your sculpture, or do you find those to be two different entities?
No. Anything that you do creatively feeds into the next thing. Everything. No matter what, even if you were to go and take pictures, you're still practicing your eye, your perception. It all feeds into what you're able to see and how you're able to create things. So yes, my drawing does help my sculpting, and my sculpting helps my drawing as well.
Nice. No, that's really cool. Do you have any like books that you recommend? Do you have like, some people have Anatomy for Sculptors. What kind of books would you recommend?
Yeah, I'm not like a huge book girl. I don't have a whole bunch of art books and stuff. But yeah, Anatomy for Sculptors is like, the go-to, like if you want anatomy in general. But I would actually recommend, what is this one that I have? Force Dynamic Life Drawing for Animators. That one. Yeah, I can't grab it. It's like stuck right now, but yeah, I recommend that one for sure. And then all the other stuff is kind of like, I just have like fine artsy figure drawing, which doesn't really like, if I'm being honest, it doesn't really like help in terms of like stylized stuff. You want more of like gestural drawing. Gesture drawing is definitely the go-to in terms of, getting good stylized energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Tablet. You're using a tablet, I assume.
Yeah. No, I'm doing it with my mind.
Ooh, that would be really interesting. What tablet do you use?
This is a 22 HD Cintiq.
Nice.
It's the old one, not the new one.
I have the 24 HD at home. I find that very comfortable. But I also have a little tiny tablet, little tiny like Wacom Intuos at work. I think it's really cool. Well, here. Yeah. So when you send files back and forth between your clients or the studios you're working with, is somebody was asking like, do you have to familiarize yourself with FTP sites? Do they set something up or
Yeah, sometimes like there's like we do like an entire thing where I'm under like a VPN on like a separate desktop or whatever, but that's actually kind of a little bit more on the rare side. A lot of the time we'll have like I'll be uploading things via like a VPN to their specific cloud or whatever, but I don't have to like have my own separate desktop or anything like that. That's usually if it's actual production. And everything's like getting through and getting ready, right? But for the most part, it's kind of just like these specific like password protected Dropbox sites that they just give me, and then I'm like, okay, yeah, you're cool, I'm cool, it's all good. But in terms of like security and stuff, you always want to be like backing up your files on like separate areas, so you don't, especially if you're like a streamer like me, you don't want to be like randomly leaking things. So I have all my files like on a whole separate thing. Like I don't keep it on the same area. So I don't randomly, I'm like, oh, hey, remember all that stuff I said that I'm not allowed to show you?
Not happening.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips or advice for trying to get like a clay sculptor transition or translation in ZBrush? I think there's translation. Yes, I might have read that wrong.
A clay. Sorry.
Have you gotten a clay? Have you tried to get a clay look? Somebody's wondering if you have any tips or techniques for getting kind of a clayish look. Let's say you want a clay render. I tell them thick skin. I think thick skin is probably do it.
Yeah.
With, the thick skin brush that comes with ZBrush. That's a good way.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would say as well. Like I don't really do that much, and a lot of people have different surface things that they have already available too that you could just apply. It's just like kind of like a surface noise that goes over top of stuff, and then you can just kind of keep layering on top of that as well. Like I don't do that, so I would really be able to.
Don't worry. This is actually why it's here, because we get to, sometimes the questions come in and it's like, yeah, we have a lot of artists that stream here as well, not just on these industry spotlights. So if to answer the question more specifically, check out all of our artists that go live. There's always an artist here live every single day with different techniques and tips, because not every artist does everything the same way. We all have different takes, and as artists, we're creative in our own right. So. But yeah, that was a fantastic question, by the way. Let's see. We still have questions coming in, but I know you also had other things you wanted to showcase. Block out.
Yeah. So like I I had started this guy the other day so that I can kind of like walk through sort of the block-in like thing that I do. Let me just get rid of this so I don't bog myself down. So this guy is a capybara, if you guys know the meme. And so I decided this is the inspiration that I wanted to do. I started this like yesterday at some point, and this is where I got before. I was like, okay, I don't have time to actually finish him, but you can see things can happen very quickly. You get this done in less than a day, right? Like it's very, very fast. And I didn't have like a specific design for him or anything like that. But he kind of showcases all of the main ideas that I was talking about in terms of like, you know, the big chunky shapes and things like that, and what you're looking for in terms of like spacing and stuff. So I'll just run through some of the, so this is literally where I started, which is just like literally like a block in, right? So I was like, okay, well, I'm looking at a capybara and I want him to be upright. So how am I going to do that? So this is literally what my block-in looks like, right? I will grab a sphere and the kind of like front like chunk of him, because capybaras have like these very like block. They're so fun, man. They literally have like they have cube heads. It's like the best. They're already caricatured, right? So it's so easy to kind of like go off of that. And so all of this is just here to help me judge proportions, which will obviously change the more that I go. And I saved this in not a very logical, like this is a step-by-step thing. So I'm just going to do my best to like talk about it as I go. So if you have questions, feel free. I'm very much like all over the place. Okay. So, you know, that would be like the blocking. And then I would go a little bit further and I'd be like, okay, well, you know, I kind of want to give him snapback hat, like the picture, and I would just start blocking that out. And because this was just so easy, the chain, I literally just like quickly modeled that out, you know, with ZModeler. So you can just easily kind of create a what are they called, like bevels, and then like push them in, like extrude them inwards via
QMesh.
Yeah, or QMesh. And you just grab the entire poly group as an island and just do it, and it's easy, right? So if you see those like quick solutions, that usually ends up in my block-ins as well. Like I don't really care about leaving something like that, like leaving it as like a tube, because I'm like, no, it's a block-in. Like I don't care. It's easy to do. I'll do it, you know? So the chain is little cinder block boots, because I didn't get anywhere with them, but I was like, you know what, I want to give them boots, and maybe I want them to be this size, right? So at this stage, I'm just dictating, you know, I'm working like, you know, this far away, and I'm like, okay, well, does this look pleasing? And if it does or it doesn't, why? And I was kind of thinking, I think at this stage, that the head itself was not doing very much. Like it felt really like homogenous with everything else. I wanted there to be a little bit more of a I guess contrast in terms of proportion, meanwhile still keeping it cute. So you can see that I, you know, made the actual body a little bit more small with the tinier legs to see if that would work. But going to the finished one, you can see where it ended up is these started getting a little bit bigger as well. And the arms themselves got smaller, so you didn't get distracted, because I am trying to get your head up here and right here too. Yeah. So these coming inwards really helps that. The whiskers as well, all coming in. And it's interesting too, talking about this, because like as I'm working, I do not think actively about this. It's sort of an intuition that happens from doing it a lot, but taking a step back, you can start to understand like, oh yeah, that makes sense in terms of like the design rules overall that you could apply to things.
Yeah. So that cap, that went from a blockout to finished.
Right. Because I didn't keep going. Right. So we kept blocking out the cap. Sorry. Thank you.
So I was like, how did you get the cap so fast?
Yeah. So you draw the circle and then you finish the owl.
That's done. That's every artist's rule book right there. Yeah. Well, so as you go through, just real quick as well, after this stream, we also at Pixelogic, we have a series called How It's Made, and our very own Paul Gabry had done his way of doing a hat. So after this method of actually showing how she does it, you're going to go ahead and you can see how Paul did it as well. So you have two examples. Two examples.
Yeah, Paul probably has a much cleaner way of doing it than me, just forewarning. Like I mean, it's clean enough.
You're fine. No. You keep going. You're good.
Yeah. So like,
we're gonna do it your way, so don't even worry. Just don't tell him.
Sorry, Paul. Sorry, I'm just completely ruining everything, just destroying the pipelines. Yeah, so blocking out like, clothing, I'm just looking for like overall like big shapes. So I'm thinking, okay, well maybe I want like the strap to be a little bit bigger. Again, like, the blocking is all about just the main shapes. I'm working very low res. I'm not worried about, any of like the extra details or stuff at this stage because I'm still not happy with the proportions. So if I'm not happy with the proportions, I'm not going to stop blocking out. Like I'm just going to keep doing it. I'll keep adding things to it, removing things to it until it looks pleasing enough, which is, going back to this, like I would assume like this is pretty much the end of the block out and starting to get into like more Dynamesh and stuff like that because I'm happier with the proportions. As opposed to this, there is a difference there, right? You can see, right? So I'm still not happy with this because all of like the bottom area, like this, he just feels top heavy. It doesn't feel pleasing. Like we're looking for maybe like what did I end up on? Like it's like almost like 2.5 heads, maybe 3, like 2, and so if we're doing that, how much of the actual torso is there and how much of it is legs really starts to play in because like if I were to start to bring down these like this thing, it kind of breaks it, right? It really just immediately breaks it, makes you kind of feel bored. But now that it's shorter, it's like, wow, how does that work? How does that happen, right? Because you're working in like thirds and you're trying to work very specifically with, what's the main focal point being the head. And all right, if we're doing like this chibi, like stylized of everything else, how does everything else follow suit in terms of sizing? It should be smaller or like, not over dominant of everything else, right? So if you were to, just give him like a really long thing, it's starting to become dominant. It's a dominant shape in the design. And that's not really like what we want, or what I want anyways. We're designing this together.
Yes.
Which one was this? Was this number 5? I'll just jump here. And then 6. So here is where I just started like, putting the hair in like the Boolean. So I would Boolean the hat just to see, I don't want to like keep anything and say like, okay, this is specifically where I want this. I'm not going to change this whole or whatever. So Boolean keeps it nice and easy to move around and I don't have to worry about that. And I don't do that in a really clean way either. So I kind of, where is he at? The Boolean, if I'm like making something and it is here, like this is just a sphere, but usually what I'll do in terms of making holes and things of that nature is I will just like go on the Boolean, which ZBrush lets you, and it'll just like start to like, and look, you can make like a monster cap, and now you've got like, rawr, like you can put like 2 like eyes there, and now it's like a monster head or whatever, and it's cool to play around with Booleans in that case because even this is it's a low res that I'm using. Dynamic subdiv on, right? So if I just take this, it's actually just like this, right? Like it's a one-sided mesh, really low res that I Z-remeshed from the sphere because then it just makes it easy. And you just dynamic subdiv this, and no matter what you do, like I could just like smooth it up to 3 so it looks like it's polished, and start like moving it around, and it stays polished and not like. You can even like, start smoothing it down, and it's just easier to handle in terms of smooth shapes and clean shapes, all of that, especially when you're blocking out. So I would say that this is like the second step to blocking out these kinds of characters for me, because now I've got like, the general proportion. I'm still kind of playing with proportions, but I want to see it more clean now. I want to start adding things to it. So it's very much like a process of, okay, you put down, like a nice big blocky block, and then you start, just polishing it out and adding to it as time goes on. So, yeah. And so then the hat, it does kind of just jump because I'm weird like that. So I'll explain. We kind of just created the owl. All right. So this, again, I would just duplicate that main mesh. I can show you.
Oh yeah.
This was micro poly, right? So it's easy to handle. But if I turn everything off, it's like this really low res mesh. So essentially, something that I do a lot is if I were to grab this guy, or not that one, this one. Yes. So if I were to grab this guy, and I was like, okay, this is too like high poly for what I'm dealing with. I'll literally just go into ZRemesher half and then hit it up. And now it's even, here, I can show you. And it'll just like cut the topology down as many times as I want. Like I can just kind of keep going and it'll keep doing that. And depending on how low res you have it will depend on what your micro poly looks like as well. So like if I were to put in something, okay, maybe a bad example, but we'll grab like the chain links. So if this is like, you know, that low res, right? That low res, then it, you know, it's replacing every single square quad with that. What's it called? The micro poly. What's it called? Yeah.
It's like an active alpha.
Yeah. So like the actual, like the mesh, like the interchanging mesh. So
oh, that's where. My bad. I'm sorry.
No. It's good. You can like cut me off anytime you want. Like I'm honestly rambling about nonsense. So yeah. So if you wanted that to be more dense, you don't have to actually touch the underlying topology. You literally just give it more smooth. Like smooth, like, and then it goes up bigger, and we can just kind of start moving this around because it's such low resolution. Look, like you don't even need to worry about any of this like stretching or being like weird or anything like that, because then you can just kind of come in here and smooth it out or whatever, and it's still it's low res enough that you don't need to worry about anything, right? And all of that is still this like low res chunk of topology. And so that's what I did for that part of the hat. And this is kind of the same thing. It's all just here we go. Yeah, low res there.
Do you have model detail, or do you have details within models that don't get seen? Do you tend to cut stuff off? I know in some of your earlier models you were talking about how you have the whole body underneath the clothing. So are there details that sometimes get hidden, but they're maybe purposeful, or do you try to delete things that don't get seen?
I mean, if I'm just like sculpting for illustration and things like that, like it does not, like it doesn't matter. Like I like look at this. You think these are hands? Fool. Like, you think this is an arm? Fool. You know, like it's just, you don't need that. You don't need that if that's not what you're trying to do. So I only do stuff that I need to see. And since this is a natural seam, you know, in the sweater, like I just have them as separate like subtools, because then I can treat them as their own individual shapes. And that makes it super easy to control as well, especially if I am posing it afterwards. Because again, like I told you, a lot of my work is post sheets, expression sheets, exploring that kind of aspect of design. And so when I have everything kind of separated into their own subtools, I can move those around super easy and just do a little bit of resculpting here and there, depending on how like squash and stretch the pose is, because I'm in animation, right? So having things in a very like rigid rig, you know, where nothing is really, you're going to break things specifically in animation. Like that's kind of like the point. You build rigs to break the mesh a lot of the time for the screen. So having everything as its own separate subtool so that I can just kind of smear it and do whatever I want afterwards is really helpful. So I don't have things underneath or hidden if I don't need to. And if it is there, I don't really care. Like if it's not in the way, like I'm not going to go out of my way to make sure it's gone because, oh my God, it has to be the cleanest thing. It doesn't, it really doesn't. Like I'm doing biz dev. Nobody is going to go in the garbage anyways. Like it doesn't matter.
That's the best way to look at it. Perfect.
But the stuff for next gen, the bodies were because of the the early rigging that was being done and the fact that the modelers requested it. They were having, they wanted to have like a main body and stuff like that to work from. It made it easier for them. So we would fill it in underneath to make sure everybody's like, everybody on the same like page in terms of like what the structure was of the like design and stuff like that. So again, everything depends on the production that you are at and what that workflow looks like. Every single workflow is different in the art department. So yeah.
No, that's awesome. Would you say this this cap that you built here, if you wanted to animate it, would you be able to with the micro polys and the, I mean, would you be able to? We have a question with the cat. Could you like, use that for animation?
Yeah. Yeah, you can use
an object that gets deformed really crazy.
No, but like honestly, you can use anything for animation. Okay, let me tell you a dirty secret. Okay, a dirty secret. If you're not at like final stage production, you can literally rig a decimated sculpt. It's fine as long as you don't care about like minor little stretching that might happen in certain areas or whatever. If it's hidden, it doesn't matter. And a lot of the time, like if it's not at the end, that's usually what we do. Like a lot of the time I will quite literally decimate something UV with ZBrush's UV system with polygroups and stuff like that. Very easy. I will be able to polygroup certain areas that I want to be different UV islands, you know, mess it around inside of ZBrush and then have that on the decimated sculpt. If it needs to have some kind of like a texture, something like that, I can add that because I just UV'd it and I'll just send that out, you know, if it needs to go really fast. But you know, there are a lot of cases where you can just use a base mesh as well for things. It doesn't need to be like this perfect topology unless you're in the pipeline and you are at a later stage where the riggers are actually taking it to then actually give it to the animators for actual final frame. But in my line of work, I don't care.
The perks of being outside the pipeline.
Well, it's still pipeline, right? But it's like it's like art pipeline.
Yeah.
Like it's like like I know that this is not the final model, right? So
gives you a little bit more freedom, which is awesome because your job is to explore too and make the character look the way it needs to look. And even then it's like, it's going to go off. And then it's just to give that really nice, the starting visualization that everybody needs to move forward. So,
well, and I think like, sorry, just like going back to like, is the cap animatable though? Because like, I want to be a little bit more straightforward. Sorry.
I love the name on that hat real quick.
Happy
animatable.
Yeah, that was some of the text tool as well, like in Z plugin, and then you can just make your own text. Very easy as well. Do it. It's nice. So yeah, the actual cap though, it is low res enough that you could put it into like Maya or something else and start doing your animations on top of it. And like Ian said, like if it doesn't need to be deformed, then we don't need to worry about very specific topology, and what I said would apply to it. But then if we are implementing this in a final frame, this is going to animators for a final feature film or something like that, and the rig itself needs to go woo, 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 woo on the head, right? Then yes, you need to have very clean topology that can be smoothed and subdivided. It needs to have proper supporting edge loops, and it needs to have enough topology that is overall, like you want essentially all of your quads to be the same size, more or less, like a uniformity amongst all of your topology, because then that makes everything a lot easier. Again, there is no exact way to do this though, because every pipeline is different. There is an underlying, you want to make sure that, you know, you have your uniform topology and you have supporting edge loops, etc. But whatever the rigger and animators will need will dictate what that topology looks like at the end.
Well said. I love it. So just so you know, we are at where it's about an hour and 40 minutes ish, right about now. Okay. So I I know you were still showing this character and stuff off. Just wanted to give you a bit of a time stamp.
No, all good. If you're bored of me, we're good.
I'm having fun. I think the chat's having fun as well. So.
No, like, yeah, if there's any like questions about like what I do with this kind of stuff, otherwise, like, I don't really have anything in particular other than, yeah, you just like block stuff out, keep it nice and low and simple if we're Cool's notesing it, and just add on top of it one, you know, next. But I guess I could go into just sort of like, not just like the sculpting aspect of it, but how I use the sculpts as like, you know, illustration and design on top of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think there's a lot of interest there. One, but two, I find that super interesting that that's part of your process and stuff like that. So absolutely, yeah. Please continue. Because actually, there was a question came in. What's your illustration process for finals? That literally rolled in. So here we go.
Yeah. So okay. Let me grab my personal thing. Grab like the jackal, so we can start with that. It's a pretty good explanation, like kind of an idea of, like, I did this like in a night, like really quick. So this is like sort of more or less of what I do, my own like thing. It's not as like, it's still stylized, but it's not like, you know, cartoony, right? But it'll give you the idea of what I still do professionally in terms of workflow. So I'll do kind of like a sculpt, you know, it'll be sort of in pose. I'll do some sort of a action to it of some kind to give it energy, unless there's a very specific want for that character. Or if I'm doing pose sheets, I'll do multiple different poses, full body, some half body, showing different expressions, etc. And then the final for this, I ended up doing like, you know, I would do like 3 different things, and that's all because I was able to grab the different angles from the sculpt that I did in ZBrush, and then I just send it over to Keyshot and put some materials down. You know, some of my own, some that are just like preset, render that out, and then bring it into Photoshop, which I will, sorry, a lot of talking, which then I will just start like overlaying different materials, and I'll do a lot of different painting on top too. So a lot of the characters that I do will be fuzzy, they'll be furry, you know, kids love fuzz and fur. I'm not going to do full grooms every single time, especially if I'm going to be sitting here doing a whole ton of different expressions and poses and things like that. I'm just going to paint it. I'm just going to paint it because we don't even know if we like this design or not. I'm not going to go through the painful process of getting that groom right every single time, even though like you can do pretty good stuff with ZBrush fiber mesh. I've done that a few times. A lot of the time I'll just take the ZBrush sculpt and I'll paint fur on top of it though. So that's usually what this ends up looking like, because the raw of that, you know, maybe I'll do something a little bit like this to indicate, but it'll be more stylized, right? So I'll indicate where these things are. And then on top of that, I will do more painting to make it actually, right, look like feathers and things like that, and just like break things up. So the difference of this versus like these spikies, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They're almost like your own hair cards.
Yeah.
You just place them.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And so then this way too, you can get a lot of like different texture passes on top, and you don't have to actually texture the thing. You don't actually have to go through that whole process. You can just be like, all right, they want this. Let's say, you know, this was a stylized character. They would say, all right, we want this thing, you know, with its mouth wide open, and we want to see it in like, you know, a desert setting or something like that. Give it different lighting. Can we see that? Then that would be easy, because now I already have this base thing that they said okay to, but now we want a little bit more posing. All right, great. Now I can just start playing around. I can, you know, maybe open this mouth more, right? And just like grab, you know, like grab all of the other stuff, open it up more or whatever, right? Sculpt around, make sure that it's all like nice, throw it over to Keyshot, and easy peasy. Now I've already got that like final image pretty much done in one sitting, and they get to see it really fast. So I apply that same workflow to the stylized stuff that I do. I just can't I can't show it because it's all under NDA. Yeah.
But no, this is super helpful. Everybody is saying thank you, by the way, for coming on here and showcasing how you work, because again, there's so much interest and there's so many different ways to use ZBrush and to get something, and this speeds up that process. Like you said, you just get to open a mouth, turn it, go send it off, and then do a paint over, and that's done. Because again, you're just trying to get that idea across, so that they could see that visualization and be inspired by it before things get committed, because time's money. So
yeah, so like this is just like a really disgusting mesh too, and this is not like a client mesh obviously, but like this is the same like vibe. Like I wouldn't mind sending over something that was like this nasty in the back or whatever, because that's not what they're looking at. They don't really care. We're looking to get this just really fast out to get it visualized and approved if it needs to be approved. And for the artsy fartsies out there, if you like to just like get messy with things, which is like the whole reason why I like using ZBrush, this one that I did actually started as like a really like quick sketch. Like I was just kind of like, I didn't even have anything in mind. I just kind of sat down and started like, snake hooking to my heart's desire, as one would. Yeah, so it started off with this, like this, right? And I was just like pulling out like all of this stuff, masking and pulling with snake hook and stuff like that. And it's really disgusting. You would never use this as a final model, but visually it's kind of cool. And that's the fun thing about ZBrush is, it's forgiving. That's what I meant by it's forgiving, is like you can just be like crunchy. You can be disgusting if you want to. And ZBrush is like, yeah, I'm cool with that. I don't judge. Like it's fine. And so that sort of a thing, I was able to then start posing it and things like that and working on top of that as well. Right. And then this is like the final 3D. And this was relatively fast to do as well. I spent more time on the painting, I think, than the actual sculpt, because you can do this so fast in ZBrush. So all of this, I would end up grabbing the actual sculpt and going into transpose. So one of my favorite things to do is this transpose. Where is it? Transpose master. You just T-pose the mesh. It'll throw everything all over into one subtool. And then you can take really big brushes. Hold on. Where we go? There it is. You can take a big brush and start pulling stuff around, right, wherever you want to. So if I wanted to bring all of these together, for example, I could just like grab the mask lasso and just like do a big overarching thing, right? And then kind of a little lag because I'm streaming right now, but but then you can just like grab all of that. You don't need to worry about the pizza boxes or anything like that, and you can start moving stuff around. So that's usually what I do for more gestural stuff as well as like the expression sheets and pose sheets that I'll do for client. And then you just hit T-pose to sub T, and it'll take everything and it will push it all back into whatever position that you had, and it'll separate all your subtools again. So it's non-destructive, easy, breezy.
That's right.
Beautiful cover girl.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Would you, when let's say you have a new artist, they come to you, they're like, hey, I'm learning ZBrush for the first time. Any tips to just have a new artist like learn sculpting? Just we're talking about not really about crunchies and not really worrying about topology. Would you say that maybe it's just good to focus on sculpting and just practice the sculptural aspect first, and just don't worry about the rest of all that? Have crunchies in your in your geometry.
Oh no, 100%. Actually, I find it really unfortunate that so many people get so bogged down by the technicals early on, because it makes the process less fun. It's just confusing. I think the ultimate thing that everybody should always remember is like, art is fun. I don't take myself seriously at all. I'm in the animation industry, for God's sakes. Like, this is fun. We make cartoons. Even if you're in the VFX industry, you make movies. Like, stop. Like, it's fun. It's gotta be fun, right? Like, you don't have to take yourself so serious. So if you just get in and focus on being an artist first and just kind of getting your hands on clay, like just treat it like this is my ball of clay, my beautiful, beautiful ball of clay. And then if you look up how to assign your hotkeys 1 through 0, okay, have some like main brushes that you have on your 1 through 0 hotkeys, so you don't have to even keep pressing B or anything like that. I have some main ones that I recommend is like clay buildup. You can replace this with standard if you want. 2, I've got Damien standard. This one will do all of your like cuts and stuff like that, and very good for just and using it on the alt and alt is Z sub and add. I've been talking a lot. I'm sorry. So then you practice with all of these different brushes with like the add and sub functions as well, and just see how they play and make something simple. Another brush is H polish. You can replace it with just polish, or I don't know, Ian, if you have a preference for your polish brush.
Oh no, I leave it alone. I just grab the H polish and just smash it down.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll what I'll do, yeah, pretty much. What I'll do sometimes too is I'll press I'll drop the smooth down to like something very, very tiny, and I'll just like kind of either do a soften or just clean up any warbles that might be there. But I don't modify my brushes that much. I just smash it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like a really big one, is just like don't worry so much about like what's the right what brush you use. Like practice with us like some of the main things. Like I said, I'll go sorry, I'm all over the place again, but clay buildup, Damien standard, H polish, snake hook. Okay, you don't need to use snake hook. Okay, you don't need to. You can use the move brush, but play around with it. I really highly recommend playing around with it, and you'll find out what kind of an artist you are. Are you a snake hook kind of person, or are you a move brush kind of person? They're very similar, but there's a key difference in terms of how you think when you use them. So I would say just play with them. I'm not going to spoil anything. Just play with them and see which kind of person, like which one do you prefer. 5, I would say inflate is really good. Obviously, you're just making things big, and play with it. Minus, you're going under, and just it's doing what it says it does. It inflates. And then 6, I've got the pinch brush as well, and you can just play with those. Anything extra like this is a brush that I got online like a while ago. I just use it for stylized things. You can see why, right? Oh, yeah. You can see why.
Sharp edges.
I cheat. I'm a cheater. I'm a fraud. And then one of my favorites as well, which is like played into one of the styles I have a lot, is the /2, which you can get inside of the Lightbox menu. And that, here, if I do that, right? So you've got, it's like kind of fun for like, a sketchy style, right? So I like to sketch on top of my models, this kind of stuff.
No, I think that's really cool. That's a great way of approaching it. And just to sprinkle just a little bit of ZBrush magic, anytime anyone is not sure of a feature, you're looking at something and you're like, I have no idea what that does, just press and hold Control over that feature.
Yes. Look at that.
And it will tell you what it does. There's still features I'm learning. I've went way down the ZBrush rabbit hole, and I really love this program, so I want to understand every facet of it. But even sometimes I'll run across something, I'm like, what does that do? Control, hover over it, hold and Control. It has saved my life so many times. So seriously, like if you're just not sure, go ahead and do that. Now, the press and hold Control doesn't work on menus, but open the menu, find something, find that feature, press and hold Control, and that will tell you what it is. And sometimes you even get a little pretty image. So just a little ZBrush magic.
Yeah, except for
press and hold Control.
What is this? What is this blasphemy?
What is deleted?
What is? No, it's red wax. Update that. That's disgusting. Get that out of my face.
I'll pass it to the No, it's a press and hold Control, and also too, just like Ash was saying too, just the alt button when pretty much all the brushes has an alt feature. So, and that's what that little bubble too is. If you see a feature that has a little bit of a bubble on there, that's just a different algorithm to run that pass a little bit differently. So you can press and open that bubble or close it, and it'll run the process differently. So, all fun stuff. Somebody said red wax is life. Exactly. Well, do you ever find that you might hit a wall when you're working or in your creative process? Do you feel like you've just ran your Corvette into a wall and you're like, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do now.
If I ever had a Corvette and then I knew I was doing something right and I wouldn't be running into walls creatively. But yeah, I guess running into walls creatively is just all kind of part of it. And if you do ever just kind of get frustrated, if you're feeling like antsy sitting out here and you're doing the bounce, you know, your leg is turning into the jackhammer, you should probably just get up and stop trying to force it, because you're not thinking right. And if you're not thinking right, you're not seeing things right. And a lot of it comes down to just having a fresh eye. So something interesting is I will literally be able to do some of these sculpts in a day. I'll have it done, but I don't want to give it off yet. I want to take a break, work on something else, and then come back the next day to do touch-ups, because I know I'll be able to see it with a fresh eye afterwards, and I know I'll see something different. So I guess I'm constantly running into walls, right? Like I'm constantly running into my own sort of fatigue of working on things constantly and, you know, looking at things. So the only real answer to that is go sleep, come back and look at it with fresh eyes, because you need that. You absolutely need that. Otherwise you're not going to be able to keep it going. Don't like force yourself to get things done like in a short amount of time. Like it's not worth it. You will always, you're going to post something online and then immediately you're like, ew, what the heck? Like, why does it look weird now? It's like, you know, like all of a sudden you're critical of it because you posted online. Usually you can avoid that kind of a thing if you just wait an extra day and look at it again. Right. Yeah. So it's the same kind of process, or not process, but thought road.
Yeah. It's the golden road of your branding.
Yes.
No, absolutely. You might have touched on it briefly in the very beginning, but we've been going for almost 2 hours now. So I kind of wanted to revisit the question a little bit differently. But how did you fall into Previs as work? Was there like, you know, somebody you met, networked, any advice for artists trying to put themselves out there besides, you know, portfolio? Like how can they find work?
So I got really lucky with the whole previs thing. I didn't start, you know, looking for previs work. Like I said at the very beginning of everything, I started work as a 3D character artist. And then what ended up happening is the company shut down and we were all looking for work. And one of the things that was open was the position at Tangent, which ended up being, you know, the next gen thing. And so that was my first opportunity to work just specifically on sculpting. But I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I didn't network a whole bunch at the company that I was at while I was a 3D character artist, showing that I was sculpting things during that job as well. Yeah. And I guess it's a little bit weird nowadays, right? Because like you're kind of in like this hybrid work, like, or work from home. So the advice that I would give is not exactly as applicable anymore. I find that times have changed a little bit and my circumstance isn't exactly what everybody would have the ability to do, because a lot of it was networking in person, right? But you know, needless to say, I think you would be in a similar position if you could get your stuff online and get looked at, right? Because what it requires is to get, you know, directors and producers seeing your work and seeing your style, and just being consistent about posting things relatively frequently. You don't have to do it super frequently, but frequently enough that, you know, they're like, oh, I saw your work from like a month ago. I really like this. It fits this project. There's been a couple of times where people will bring up something that I've done like 2 years ago in email. They'll send me that and be like, hey, I found this that you did. It really suits this project. Would you like to do something? Right. And it's just the fact that it's online and out there. I'm like, that's so weird. You know, like that's just like such a random thing I just wanted to do for myself. And yet you know, yeah. And so I think if you want to get into previs, focus on focus on storytelling. That's the big one. And
Yeah.
you keep saying that storytelling is king. Second is make sure that you're doing stuff that interests you specifically. So pick themes that you really enjoy doing, not what you think everybody wants. Because if you're working as a previs artist or even like a designer or anything, they're looking for you as like an artist, right? And what are you bringing to the table as an artist, not your technical skill alone. They're saying, okay, well, what do you do? Like, what's your pizzazz? Or whatever the heck that, like, is it pizzazz? Like, what do people say, right? So you're not wanting to do just another orc or just another elf, you know, like, or just another, no offense, but like not another Spider-Man, right? Like you're competing with, so unless you specifically really want to work on Spider-Man specifically and only Spider-Man, then okay, all right, but you know, what else do you offer? Like, what's your style, right? Yeah. Like, who are you as an artist? And that's what you want. So I think that's like the big thing that you want to be focusing on with Previs is art first, which is conflicting to a portfolio for character art. Because, you know, design is separate from character art alone. Like if you're doing, you know, character art, you're still helping design things. The difference is that a lot of the time in production, you're working from something that already is a set design. Like it's already had all the brute forcing done to it, right? They're like, this, do this, like figure out what the back of it looks like. That's fine, but this is what we want, right? Like, whereas like if you're doing like character design, you're kind of like in the wheelhouse of ideas with the director, right? Which is fun, but also, like I said before, like you're going to be throwing a lot of stuff away. And so it's less about the technicals and more about what is that final look going to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that's great advice. Thank you for sharing that. Right now,
it's confusing.
So I dropped your links. So her schedule for when she goes live on ZBrushLIVE, as well as her art station, is in the chat now. So you can definitely check her out when she goes live there, because she always does. Your streams are pretty long, actually. I would say you go for about 4 hours.
Yeah, I go for 4 hours usually, for sure.
Yeah. A nice little break in between, like a 2-hour mark.
Yep, with the Monty.
Absolutely nice. See, so if anybody has any last questions, we've hit 2 hours, and so we're going to start wrapping up a little bit. But if there's any final questions, feel free to throw them on in last minute as we go through. But again, thank you so much, Ashley, for being here. It's been amazing. And honestly, I hope that everybody was able to get a little bit something out of this, because you shared such great tips, advice, and also too, it's just nice to see a different style of your work. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wish I had like more that I could share, honestly. Like if you do have any questions, feel free, even if like you don't hit me up here, like if you have questions about anything, like hit me up on other things. It's like I'm always a little bit weird about talking about like how do you get into this industry, because of the way that like I did it is it's so weird and organic. Like it's not a very specific way. And when people ask me for portfolio advice, I'm just like vibes, you know, because that's actually how I look at it. And I want to be as genuine as possible, but I also know that that's very unhelpful. So if you are a junior looking to get a junior job specifically, it is difficult to break into biz dev right off the bat. Like I would say that would be a very difficult thing, like right off the bat. Like I just want to have a sculpt, like a portfolio of only sculpts and things like that. Like I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend having like the full deal, because you're more useful in the pipeline. You're more hireable if you're looking to get into a studio specifically. But if you're okay financially and you want to hold out for like a biz dev job, then just sculpt your heart out and figure it out. Like, what do you like to do, and just go ham on that specifically. But yeah.
And I would say too, just to add a little bit extra on top, just always keep your portfolio circling, because you never know who's looking at what. So it's not a huge like instant gratification. You put your portfolio out one time and then boom, you're hit up by 80 studios. I wish, but if you're really trying to take your portfolio to the next level, just keep it out there. Just keep working in ZBrush. Just keep sculpting and keep having fun. That's the most important aspect you can do. Have fun with it, because if you have fun with it, that passion's going to translate and people are going to notice that. So
yeah.
Keep it going. But yeah.
Well, you're also not going to finish anything if you're dreading what you're doing. Like, you're not going to want to finish any of it. Like how are you supposed to be creative if you're not enjoying? Like, there's like such a bad idea that like artists have to be so depressed, you know, in order to channel their emotions or whatever. Like, ignore all of that. That is stupid. You do your best work when you are feeling like you're in a good mental place, and you're going to be in a good mental place if you're choosing themes that you enjoy specifically and that speak to you as an artist as well. Like, a lot of things in the 3D industry, I find when people are talking about anything that they do, they're thinking about it on such a like technical level that they forget all of that even exists. And that's why I introduced myself sort of like as artsy fartsy, because I come from 2D. I come from like that kind of like fine arts, but it's so easy to apply with a program with ZBrush because you don't have to think so much about the technical right off the bat. You're able to just focus on the fun and the feeling of everything as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And we're going to leave it on that. So everybody, thank you again. Ashley, thank you again so much for coming on here, hanging out with me. Hopefully I wasn't too boring for you.
No, I feel like I was boring, so I apologize.
You were good. So again, everybody, just real quick reminder too that next Tuesday we're going to have Brody Perkins on Industry Spotlight. We do these every Tuesday, so there's always something happening on ZBrush Live here. So be sure to go check out stuff. Again, thank you, Ashley, so much. And for that, we're going to wrap it up. So thank you, and everybody have a great and wonderful, delicious evening.
Delicious evening.
Yeah.
Now I have to order pizza.
Oh, that sounds good. Awesome. All right.
Bye.